and this is a true story, and my identity is wrapped up in being Choctaw. So what that means is, as a child, I grew up hearing lots of stories about spirits. So it was not uncommon for me to hear about Dear Woman, Staholo, Stigini, and there are lots of belief systems surrounding spirits in particular. And I could even go to a friend at school or a fellow Choctaw student that I went to church with, and we would just share these stories about Quinacosha. We were warned not to stay out late at night because the Quinacosha would come and get us. We were warned to not run around our house 3 times or something would chase us. We run the risk of bringing it inside our house. So my identity is deeply embedded in these types of stories that I heard growing up. One of the beliefs that Choctaws have that I've heard growing up is this belief that when someone dies, their spirit will come back 3 days later. And I really had not had any paranormal experiences in my life that I could draw upon until the year that I turned 16. And that was the year that my grandfather died. My grandfather's name is Raymond Lewis. And my grandmother worked outside of the household, and he was basically what you would call a shade tree mechanic. And growing up, that's all that I really saw him do. We would have lots of cars in our yard, and he would find ways to make them run again. He was very good at making cars run again. It so happened the church that we attended had tried to set up a new structure just a little bit south of Durant. The church is called Grace Indian Baptist Church. And my grandfather went to go help the people at the church raise the building. What ended up happening is he stepped on a nail. My grandfather has diabetes, and for you and me, we would probably take an antibiotic and we would go and be fine. But for a diabetic, this is very bad news, and it ended up being very fatal for him. So throughout the next 4 years, I watched this disease just set inside his foot. And by the time I was 16, it had worked its way up to the leg. So they were threatening to cut off a toe, they were threatening to cut off a foot, and then they were threatening to cut off a leg up to his knee. So he went into a great deal of mourning on all of these operations that he was told that he needed to have. He decided that he wanted to keep his leg. What ended up happening is you would hear him, his gait had changed. He had went from having a smooth gait to a shuffle. He shuffled wherever he went. And the ravages of diabetes had also taken his eyesight. It was not uncommon. He loved coffee. And so throughout, I had the bedroom next to him, and throughout the night I would hear him get up from his bed and he would make his way into the kitchen. And he would make himself a cup of coffee, and he would go back to his bedroom. And there were sounds, a sequence of sounds you would hear as he made his way to get his routine coffee. I would say even like every 2 hours he was drinking a cup of coffee. There was one night he died, and I remember my mother, she was the one that had heard him fall. He fell as he was going to get a cup of coffee. He fell, and I remember my mother jumping up and going to see what was wrong and finding him on the floor. And I remember her screams. She kept calling for her daddy, my grandfather. And it was a very unsettling, very terrifying kind of thing to wake up in the middle of the night and hear. He didn't survive the night. He departed this world and left us with a very unsettled feeling, like, what do you do? How do you move on when you've known someone your entire life? They're no longer a part of your home. And how do you progress and move on from that? It's very difficult. So we were in a great deal of mourning. And I remember throughout the process of preparing for the funeral and the people coming to help us mourn, and the conversation would sometimes light upon, well, he's going to come visit you in 3 days. And I remember in the back of my mind, in my 16-year-old mind, thinking, oh, Grandpa's going to come visit me, and I don't want Grandpa to come visit me. But I kind of like blocked it out and just forgot about it. The day that we buried him was the 3rd day of his death. And I went to sleep to bed that night, and we were just all exhausted. It had been a long day. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know why or how this happened, but I looked at my alarm clock and it said 3 o'clock. It was 3 a.m. And then I heard a creaking. The creaking came from his bedroom. Nobody was in his bedroom. And it sounded just like him rising from his bed. And in my hazy mind, I thought, you know, Grandpa is here. But then my logical mind kicked in and was like, no, that's not Grandpa. Grandpa's not with us anymore. Then I heard the shuffling of footsteps. And he also liked to run his finger along the wall to help guide him because he wasn't so sure-footed anymore. And he depended on the walls to help him. So you just heard these series of steps making its way down the hallway. And I just remember being in my bed, petrified, my heart pounding, and not knowing what to do with all of this because I'm still in this type of sleep state. I heard the steps moving into the kitchen. I heard rattling of silverware, which he typically would do when he was making his cup of coffee. And then my mind started going, and I was like, oh, he has to come back. He's going to pass by my door. I'm going to have to see him. I didn't want to see him. And I did not hear that. It got as far as the kitchen, but it never made its way back, and it was really hard to fall asleep that night. I don't know how I fell asleep that night, but I do remember that that was a Choctaw belief that I firmly believe exists today, and that we still have these strong, powerful stories that are available to us that go way back to ancient times. So I'm a great believer in the stories that our elders have to share with us.